Today's guest is Aleks Jakulin, founder and president of Data.Flowers, an undertaking to build a future internet of data that amplifies human thinking and boosts collective IQ. Among many other things, Aleks is one of the fathers of the internet as we know it today. His work impacted billions of people by bringing standards like the PNG or JPEG into the world. In this episode, we cover his personal journey, his time in Silicon Valley, lessons he drew from his life under communism and war, the cycles of society, and how to develop an Alexandrian spirit. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This episode is brought to you by NewVPN.online. Whether you're a writer, a rebel, or a researcher, NewVPN encrypts your digital life, shares your data, and lets you explore the world freely. Go to newvpn.online, use the code Alexandrian to get a special discount, and support the podcast while you're doing so. NewVPN, your mind is free, make sure your browser is too. Aleks, thanks for coming by. How are you doing today?
Good. Almost finished my coffee.
I have literally 3 coffee next to the computer here I see this ammunition for the coming adventure. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for showing up today in this interview, but also for the support you've given me it's been almost 6 months right now, right?
I've been enjoying our chats. It's not work, it's pleasure.
Likewise. And we've been introduced by Bojana. Shout out to her, one of the most wonderful scientists I ever get to meet. And you've been a great voice of clarity in regards to bringing something to market with the new company. And it was a pleasure to learn from you. So when people ask you who you are, what you do, how do you introduce yourself to them? Because you've been a man of many parts and chapters and different projects. What do you typically say to them?
I'm Alex. Hello. And then I usually, maybe include something that, might be relevant to that particular person. There is no description that would work in all situations. We're all kind of complex and multidimensional. And then, we introduce that part of ourselves that we hope is going to help bridge and create a connection.
Mm. If I would turn maybe to double down on that, if you would write a big autobiography in Stunberg tomorrow, and now I turn the book and there's a little description of the author, what would you add to that little summary of that is being written about you?
It's a good question. Maybe it's going to emerge through this conversation. But I think what we share is this interest in the past and the future at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? How do we learn from the past as to improve the future?
It's for people who have not been the person being present in some of our old calls in a way. I remember that in our very first meeting when we were introduced by our common friend, I put you a little bit the idea of what I was working on, which was like psychological immortality, particularly with the use case of creating a bridge between the generations for intergenerational advisory. And I remember that in this, you really allowed me to take this low resolution vision and make it a little bit more clear. Why do you think this topic about connecting the past with the future was interesting to you, or what is like something about this topic that speaks to your heart?
I mean, this is the essence of humanity, right? Like, we're not intrinsically all that intelligent on our own, but our ability to convey what we've learned, what we know, to others is really like the distinguishing characteristic of Homo sapiens. I mean, we like to think we're smart, right? Like, but the thing is that we And our minds are a result of a couple of 100,000 years of cultural evolution. So like we are evolving our mindset, our outlook over life is evolving through generations.
One of the questions, Alex, that I have for you is, I feel you're a great enthusiast, not just for technology, entrepreneurship, and the sciences, but also for humanity itself. And it always feels that where did this positive view of you being a humanist also emerge from? Did you have any early childhood influences from you that made you be pro humanity rather than against? And I'm feeling there's a lot of voices in the world right now where if you dig deep enough, these people have been so disappointed by some of the members of their cult that they just dismissed the whole human story with altogether. How did you preserve your optimism? And who's maybe one of the programmers of that mindset running within your sphere?
Life is a relay race, right? You run one circle and then you pass on the stick to the next guy. And if you mess up, your whole team has lost.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have to keep running till you pass on your stick.
It's and probably in the culture where I am right now, there was a big movement in Germany, for instance, to tear down statues and to rewrite history and completely dismiss the people who've come before us due to their imperfection and biases and crazy ideas that they have. But I personally always felt that I grew up in a little neighborhood where it was Germany is run by this multicultural theme in a way, and on paper it looked like everybody would bring in their ancestral cultural habits and stories, but it had like more like an orphanate kind of village to it where we had to make up our own, and we suffered tremendously from not having somebody who gave us the batons, so to say, where we could brag about like these are the greats from my village, this is what they done in a way. And when you think about your own childhood, like how did you grow up, and who was one of the people you felt like helped you to um become who you are, so to say, or at least like form this human spirit, which is one of creation rather than destruction?
I'm from like families from the mountains. We're not like cultured city people. We're like simple peasants, but proud peasants. Because there is a lot of wisdom in how do you keep land over generations without messing it up. Because like fundamentally to be a good farmer means like you've got this piece of land and you have to take really good care. And this is the best outcome for your family, for your descendants. Right? Like, and this is in vast contrast to a different mindset, which is like take the most out of the land, kind of rape the land and then move on and, take someone else's land. Right. So I think one of there are a couple of places around the world where people really like took care of their land, of their cities, where they've like thought not just about themselves, but about, the coming generations. So, I think we need to protect this long-term thinking and this, focus on the future. And sometimes I see, especially among the folks who are kind of leaning green and like thinking about environmentalism, and they have this mindset, oh, like we're destroying the world, we should just vanish. Well, no, like they might vanish with, their care for the world, but like people who do not care about the world don't mind.
Yeah.
So basically, this is like such a self-destructive even worse than self-destructive. It's like world-destroying mindset, which is like, oh, I'm just gonna go away because I care too much about the world, and give the world to all the people who do not care about the world. I mean, come on, seriously? Like,
It's I heard I think it was controversial psychologist John Peterson once say that environmentalists don't love the world, they just hate humanity. And it's I find that very interesting. The degree where how a person sees the world really is a mirror to the myth that is governing that particular person. And I think one of the things that our society is not doing such a good job is like, I'm coming from a psychological and philosophical and religious background with studies that were interesting to me. But the old books really made an emphasis that there's like two human stories that can govern individuals, which is the story of creation, pretty much of the hero story, but that there's also a nihilistic agent that can possess a human being who feels that it would be better if being would not exist, and sometimes this is personified as the devil or something. And I always like to try to hear for the color of that thoughts, and it's like, who's animating that person currently, and like what story is coming forth, and what would that look like fully manifested if you say like a peasant from the mountains. But even in this story, there's so much beauty that I would like to unpack with you quickly, because there's a succession element in it too, where there's a sense of responsibility and a sense of like, we've built this, it's now yours to take care. And one of the things why I'm gonna blame like the system, got kicked out from school was because there was no expectation put on me in any way. It was more like a generalistic kind of approach, but nobody believed in me to the degree where they said like I could contribute something of worth to my society. But if you come from a more elitist standpoint, like executive education for children is way different, because if you inherit an empire, you make sure that they know to not fuck up what has been built before. And I feel in the idea of like, you get some land or you get some village or something like that, there's a succession element in two. How was your education in the earliest form a bit different from what you feel is being fed to uh, the city people at the moment, in a way? Because it feels like it's literally them who are causing a lot of the trouble, I think.
I mean, my own upbringing was it was basically under the socialism, communism of basically at that time dying Yugoslavia, right? Like we had to pledge allegiance to the great leader in the beginning of every day. Um, but like at the same time, the whole establishment was losing um, its its strength, and people kind of recognize that the country is not running well, that the system that has been hoped for and imagined is highly dysfunctional. So it was strange, right? Like it's almost like you're um like in your young years, you're seeing the coming of the winter. And then, clearly enough, there was a civil war, and had like battles in my town, and enemy helicopters flying over the house, and we were running into the basement, and there was no television for a couple of days because the enemy planes blew up the transponders. Like, was not many people died, right? Like, but it definitely was a war. Like, I didn't know if my father would ever come back. We didn't hear from him for 2 weeks or whatever, and he was there like himself, trying to keep his soldiers alive. Like, some of them were eager. They wanted to go and fight, and he was like, wait, you don't have weapons. um
It's What would you say? Like, that's for two things that I would like to unpack here. Is one, I met somebody here recently in Berlin who there's a club. It's called Berghain. It's like this underground techno club in a way, and it's very hard to get in, and it's really prominent. And I asked her what was the lesson she learned from that club, and she said that everything is a social experiment. And the communism was by many means also a social experiment that somehow gets rebooted over and over again. What was that? What impact do you feel like this had on your area or your family in a way? Because it feels that many people are, particularly intellectuals, in where I'm in Berlin. So Berlin is a hardcore leftist uh, stronghold still. Like there's statues of Marx everywhere, and there's statues of Stalin, and there's with 30 meters tall still, and all these kind of things. So it's like the ghosts of the past are still very alive in this place. What would you tell to somebody of maybe who hasn't seen the end of that social experiment where it leads, and what impact did it have to you personally and to your family, you would say?
To me, what's one of the points that was like the breaking point for me, right, was when my savings vanished, and they vanished because of hyperinflation. And I was bringing my savings to school, and keeping it in the school bank, and so on, and at some point I was just like, I would like my money back, and like, well, here is basically nothing. And I'm like, guys, like, banks, real banks have interest rates, and you know, what did you do with my money? And they were like, well, like we bought the sound announcement system, with the interest. I'm like, but this isn't fair, right? Like, so this is really like the essence of the systems, right? Like at some point, they're no longer fair. And when they're no longer fair, they lose the support. Now, the challenge is like, what do people think is fair, and what is their model of reality? So, but like, when it comes to money, like people are pretty, hardcore, and like have a pretty kind of grounded understanding. So when your money's wiped out, you feel robbed, and then you stop supporting the system that led to it.
What is something, how do you feel? What does money mean in this context? Because I feel it's not just resources. It seems there is an underlying meaning attached to it as well.
I mean, at that time I was a kid, right? Like I saw pledging allegiance to a leader that died, as if there is, nothing present. It's like pledging allegiance to the past. We knew that like the richest people were the truck drivers who were stealing the fuel and then selling it, because there were no consequences to bad acts. And then, when the system actually did collapse, like everyone became pro-democratic, right? Like, and to some extent, this ensured the continuity of the communist leaders that then kind of privatized, the public wealth that basically got the government provided housing for very cheap, and in some sense, there was this huge privatization where people who already had a lot kept it and was now their own. So some of the greatest injustices happened actually after the transition to democracy, where the people that were before like kind of serving the socialist system, which wasn't perfect, but I mean to some extent it was somewhat just. The end result was basically just this privatization, and there was a bit of respect for the system by these folks, but like their kids kind of forgot what happened, and are now like praising this leftist leaders, while at the same time like their private wealth, right, that funds their lifestyle, was pretty much stolen from the people.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of like paradoxical, but like there's this long-lasting intuition. Some people call it anacyclosis. So it goes back to Aristoteles, and then Machiavelli wrote about it. And it's basically this idea that, first there is a kingdom, but then it becomes corrupt and turns into a tyranny. So then the tyranny is taken down by the aristocracy, who set up a new system, a republic. But then it becomes inbred and it becomes an oligarchy. And then an oligarchy is brought down and is replaced by a democracy. But then democracy loses its principles and it becomes an ochlocracy, which is mob rule, almost anarchy. It's like anyone can be a leader as long as they're sufficiently persuasive. And then in this chaos, people kind of like elect a king who's going to basically create order again. And states in the past have been cycling in the system. So the one of the cool things about the U.S. Constitution is that like they understood that, like they drew a lot of inspiration from this problem of the cycling between good king, bad king, good republic, bad republic, good democracy, bad democracy, and they tried to basically make all of these coexist at the same time. So you've got the president that's a bit like a king, you've got the Senate that's a bit like the aristocracy, and you've got the House, which is a bit like a representative of the popular opinion, right? And this thing's gonna hold each other in balance. But with the sufficiently large amount of ideology and populism and memes and chaos and detachment from reality and truth, you basically get the cycling again, because you break apart the this kind of layering of this independent foundations of governance. So I think right now we live in an environment that's kind of like ochlocracy, and we don't quite have the benefit of having a functioning king or a functioning aristocracy.
So what comes next? Hold on, let me get a pen first. I'm losing some thoughts. Hold on a second. So one of the questions I have for this is, what do you believe will happen next? I got lots of pens right now, so I'm not running out of them again. No, I love this. That's so interesting from a cycle. And I think a great book on this of Generations. I forgot who wrote it, but that's a good read on that. I want to circle back a little bit. One of the reasons why I'm doing my current project is also because of it's my way of coping with loss and dealing with uncertainty. And my father's from Lebanon, and they've had, man, is there any area in the Middle East that has been longer stretches for civil war and chaos than that area? It seems there's always fighting over there. And for me, experiencing fear of my father's life has been motivating me to create a platform potentially where you can even talk to people after they're gone in some form. What did it did to you that your father had these experiences? And because I sometimes feel there's certain nexus events, like with a superhero, for instance, where them going through particular stuff in the earliest chapters set them up to acquire particular superpowers later on. Think of Batman losing his parents, or Spider-Man getting bitten by the spider. What do you think did it to you as a human being that your father had exposure to war, both on the good and the bad side, so to say? Because it feels that this modern generation is they know the word for what war is on paper, but I feel unless you've seen it, it's a foreign concept that just gets forgotten. And one of the problems I would like to solve with this podcast and our platform and supporting everybody who's working is that we don't make the same mistakes over and over again. Because it feels to me that we're in a through our technological advancement, can't afford these cycles anymore. I've seen. Have you seen? There's a movie called, I think it's like, with Denzel Washington. It's like he's in a submarine, and they're having a discussion on the board on whether they should fire nuclear weapons or not. And there's one quote I really like. It's, since the atomic age, war has become the enemy of mankind, not other tribes that we are battling with, in a way. And it seems to us that we can't just play the same game anymore, and they need to evolve out of it a little bit. So my question would be, how did war affect your family and you personally also, through the experiences that your father went through, if I may ask that?
It's so many things that happen, but maybe another relevant point is that by the age of 15 I left home. I went to a different country. I managed to win a scholarship and went to an international high school with 200 kids, pretty small high school, but these 200 kids were from 70 countries. So, in some sense, I wasn't really planning to emigrate, but at the same time, just going from like one context, right, and one group of people that are growing up in a particular system to kind of going to a completely different system. And then, coming back, I never really felt like I'm aligned. I became kind of this strange particle that like no longer, properly plugs in. And, that kind of like puts you on a quest. The joke is like you marry well, you have a happy life, and you marry badly, you become a philosopher. So in some sense, this journey of seeing other ideas and other cultures and other perspectives kind of made me a bit of a permanent misfit. I I guess I was too proud to just like bend my back to the system. But at the same time, I was a kid. I was whatever, 18, 19, 20. Like I wasn't like gonna have my own mob to set the rules. So this has been really my journey. It's not like I'm a continuation as much of my family. In a way, I went on this journey, and this journey changed me.
It's one of the reasons. What I found so interesting is my company is called Alexandrian, and it's partly inspired by the Alexandrian spirit of not bowing down to anybody. And it's like I always think of this scene. There's a Zack Snyder action flick, 300. Have you seen it? And there's it's one great scene of that movie where Xerxes, the tyrant who tries to bring his empire to Greeks, like says like, I'm gonna make you king of all Greece and give you all these things, but you just have to bow. And he says, Leonidas says like, I would love to, but there's a cramp in my back. I can't do it today. And I feel that this inability to submit to systems is part of what makes this Alexandrian spirit important for humanity. How did you become a person pretty much who became a leader and was able to stand up for his own thoughts, or as you said, a misfit? Because it feels that it's really the misfits who save the world and who speak the truth and who will not bow down to the nonsense, the tyranny, the social experience that we are running constantly.
I often think it was a big mistake. I think life would have been much better if I just bow down. But by the way, like speaking of bowing, a couple of weeks ago I was in Vietnam, and one of the things that really struck me, apart from like, it's a great country, but the thing that really struck me is that in 46, the emperor stepped down and became an advisor to a communist government. And then a bunch of other things happened and so on. But like, the whole idea, right? Like of a gentle succession, when the world changes, when the environment changes. And like it was this government, right, that didn't want the war against somehow kind of Western supported alternative government in the South. But like after after the war was decided, it wasn't like some sort of a genocide or destruction of ideas. Like it's yeah, I mean it's a communist country, but there is still an ability to think differently. Like people aren't being persecuted, right? Like so basically, the lesson here is that you can have relatively gentle transitions from very different systems. And it's usually like the ability of a country to basically undergo this transition in a soft, gentle way that maximizes its potential in the future.
I loved going to Vietnam. It's been a great country to visit. I was there 2 years ago, and I was just fascinated how you can still feel the clash of these systems through all the art and museum that has been preserved. And one of the things I would like to ask you is, I think a good question always to ask is when visiting a country or when even meeting an individual, is like, who is that person worshiping? Because like bowing down to something is not necessarily a bad act, but it can also be that you're um, in the presence of having your values properly calculated. And one of the reasons why my father named me Daniel, there are stories in the Bible, for instance, of this spirit or this prophet who was called by the emperor Nebuchadnezzar, who was like a tyrant, and was asked to bow down to along with some other felons, and he wouldn't do it. And because of it, he was thrown into a cave with lions, pretty much to say. And it's like I always love the idea that certain people are just inability to worship humans by themselves. And maybe there's something wrong with this hero worship that is, for instance, going on in America too, because it feels that if we, for instance, don't worship something that is greater than the sum of humanity itself, we pick idols or emperors or tyrants or sports stars or celebrities or TikTokers, but it seems that it needs to be always something we bow down to. And you as somebody who was touched by communism, for instance, or the family before you, one of the things I always find fascinating about being here in Berlin is all these statues. It's like for a system that was apparently everybody's equal, there's a lot of statues of these ideologues in a way who ran this. What do you make of this personality code that occupied socialism so very much, and still many areas in Thailand has the same personality code also? When was in Thailand, for instance, and there's a picture of the king in every cab, and before the movie in the cinema drives you, so you wish the king well. And what do you make of it, and how do you feel? How does this personality code, this personality worship affect you through your experience with communism?
I think people have been living in an environment that is somewhat hierarchical for a very long time, right? Like, was it the tribal leader? Was it a king? Was it whatever? Like, this has existed for a long time, right? But the question is, how do we interpret that, and who are the leaders? And our kind of historic understanding has been that that the entity to be praised or respected as human, right? And then successful, historically looking, successful religions have kind of redirected a part of this worship to gods, spirits, and in that sense, they when you use this like human psychological tendency to follow, right? You can kind of create a system where people don't follow other people, but where people follow ideas or values, right? Like, the Greek and Roman gods were, gods of values. And, in many ways, it's kind of helpful to kind of think like, hey, I'm going to be praying to this particular god who, that represents this particular virtue or this particular ability. And then when you go to Christianity, right? Like, for example, the whole notion of saints, or even the Holy Trinity, right? Like these are, in a way, more specific, more granular, values, virtues that you basically pay attention to. Now, now we come to communism, right, and socialism and so on. So a lot of the, a lot of this ideological movement has been kind of breaking away with the past in a potentially violent way. Like just slaughtering the family of the Russian emperor, or the destruction of religion, where it was it was untenable to be both a member of the Communist Party and go to church. Right. So in some sense, like you see this tendency to accumulate power, and at some point you don't get power based on your virtue or your value, and if you still want more power, the way you do it is by destroying the reputation, sometimes unfairly, usually unfairly, of something else. Right? Like, so at some point it becomes this destructive element of gaining power at the expense of existing sources of power in the society. So communism, to be able to kind of do their thing, they had to keep going. They had to remove the emperor. They had to remove the elites. They had to remove the large farmers. They had to remove the religion, right? Like they just kept destroying to get ever more power for that ideal, right? Like, and I am seeing this right now with this desire to tear down statues. I mean, I'm okay with tearing down like an ugly, old statue, right? But like to tear down a statue just for the sake of disagreeing with it is fundamentally a power play. Because whoever's doing it, they're going to put their own statues instead. And they're going to erase that memory.
It reminds me of gaslighting, like from a personal sense, where you're like, you want to alter the narrative to some point. And I had an interesting point when I would love to also talk about parents a little bit, where I was a very troublesome teenager. I have like a pathological urge to resist any form of authority, whether justified. It's like something I had to learn. And I remember one of my teachers taking me aside when he noticed that I was a little bit of an asshole in regards to my mother. And my mother is this hippie like figure, like she's not the most authoritative kind of figure. And he said, he gave me a speech pretty much about the idea of honoring the archetype. You criticize the person, but don't make sure to throw away the archetype. And I feel this is also interesting for society, where you can criticize the king as a person, but if we want to dismiss with the whole social construct, also what you're destroying the very social structure that helps us to orient ourselves, and we have to start from scratch. And one of the things that I would find interesting as a person. Have you seen a little bit into the history of Alexander the Great's, your neighbor, mother, for instance? And she's been a person of great interest to me. And I feel like one of the things that's interesting for asking for leaders is, who is that person worshiping? What is the city particularly follow up? Because she was a great seducer. For instance, she would seduce Alexander to thinking that he is one of the descendants of the gods and has like a great play to partake in the world. And she was called a follower of Dionysus, like the god of wine, so to say, which was like kind of a. And when you look at the current climate, particularly in the United States, what do you feel is animating those leaders in regards to who are they following? What are they doing in a way? It's a very vague and vague question, but I think my question is trying to get at is the current government seems to be really at war with the old government, and there's no peaceful transition of one baton to the others. What do you make of all that?
Ooh, it's really complex. I mean, to some extent, systems evolve and change, and there is a kind of a tendency for this to happen every 100 years or so. And funny enough, when you make a prophecy that like every 100 years there is going to be some sort of a change or rift or so on, then people make it happen simply because they believe in it, right? Like this is the notion of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the weapons in every war are different, right? And we built the internet, right? Like was supposed to connect humanity, and instead it became a tool for demagoguery and for post-reality or post-truth. Like it's it's fascinating. Like for example, when you look at the world wars of the 20th century, right? Like to a large extent, they were a result of mass communication, mass media, right? Like it was possible for a leader to project their power through the radio and then control large masses of people and kind of throw them into the fire. When you look at the the backgrounds of this great individual leaders, not great as in good, but great as in big. Mussolini was a newspaper editor. So was Stalin. And Hitler was a marketer. He was an ad designer. Like, these were all people that were fundamentally about mass media. And you used mass media for an implementation of their vision.
Alex, I'm 5 minutes away from a place called Lustgarten in Berlin, and it was like I go there every day, and it was like my friend, shout out to you, Asfanjar Malik, CEO of Volvo. He always shows me like pictures, or like he likes to just Google stuff while we are walking, and then he shows me a picture of like Hitler standing literally on this great palace giving a speech. There's like torches on left of the side, designed this huge religious and environment to invoke to pretty much animate his followers, and it's so crazy to be so close to where this happened. How do you feel the demagogues of today are using these new tools to shift opinions and to get ahead? How do you feel this original idea of the internet of connecting people? How do you think it's currently being used, and what do you make of what's happening right now in your own world? There's or maybe a better question: have you read The Foundation by Asimov?
Yeah, one of my old favorites.
I love this book. There's a great Apple recently put this to screen, and there's one great thing they did where it's like they had this thing that can predict the future, psychohistory as an artifact, and it shows up like different timelines. And At one point, they predict this great crisis where humanity is potentially going to be wiped out. So, what do you make of the current use of technology, and where do you think we are heading? Like, what is your your prediction onwards, or say, what does your gut feeling say? What visions do you have in regards to this?
The self-fulfilling prophecy is that the internet can connect humans and life in general around a coherent action of a single self-aware ecosystem, right? Like we can actually make it. We can create something like this. We can create a planetary level intelligence, and this is really powerful. But kind of going back, and I would recommend reading Asimov, not just watching the TV series. The the other thing is like, who are the current heroes in the internet? And there is a long history of information war, and I think we are in a kind of a state of an information war with people who know what they're doing, who are shifting and shaping ideas, and trying to propagate it, irrespectively of whether these ideas are worthwhile. Like usually they're being propagated artificially, even if the ideas themselves might not be particularly good. The other thing that I'm noticing is that there is this the shift to internet video has led to in some sort of hyper production of information. Like there are people who keep producing like a huge amount of content, and this can be tweets or it can be podcasts or whatever. But like what happens then is that to keep track of it, right? Like people exclude other sources and stop really thinking on their own. And you've got basically, these, so-called influencers that are then becoming the almost like tribal leaders.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the danger is to be to lack this connectivity around yourself, to be receiving too much information from just one source.
I recently reread Viktor Frankl, one of my favorite authors, Jewish therapist who was in Auschwitz and who have seen some of these social experiments like National Socialism play out until the very end. And one of the things that he warned about was the corruption of the idols of a generation in a way. And then when I look at my current generation, it's YouTubers, TikTokers, it's a lot of people who have prominence for the sake of having prominence. And my last podcast guest, Gary Files, I need to introduce him to, he also mentions the word post-truth, and he said the dilution of the word began for him personally with the birth of copywriting. It was so interesting. He said, like, we at some point went away from holy people honoring the word and passing on earned wisdom in order to make things better, and to transition to this kind of content for the sake of lead generation, or like in influence in itself. And where do you see we are in a climate of truth, and how do we can potentially return back to our foundations of speaking for the sake of accelerating enlightenment rather than personal enrichment?
Well, the good news is that like bad ideas have a tendency of killing themselves, and there are not that many good ideas. There is this long continuity, right? Like if you look at it, Christianity is a fork of Judaism, and Islam is basically a fork of Christianity. Like Jesus is a prophet in Quran, right? Like all of these things have like this long continuity of evolution. Like there are no revolutions here. It's continuity, right? So whatever, if I'm going to make a prediction, like the future is going to be basically a continuation of these fundamental philosophies and religions that we've known from the past. I don't think the world has changed so much that we're going to see something completely new, something completely different. Instead, we might see some variations on the things that already exist, right? Like, for example, something that has changed is basically the technological mastery of the natural environment, right? So for example, when you look at the religions of animists, like even in contemporary Siberia, you're gonna see animistic beliefs. There's so much about maintaining the ecosystem, about respecting different living beings and species and so on, right? Like it's about not killing your environment, right? Because if you're a hunter, like it's very easy to just kill your environment and then starve because you've killed the last mammoth. So now there are no more mammoths, and you might be able to catch a rabbit, but it's not good life anymore. I mean, it was Neanderthals that did like, in industrial scale bullion production in Germany out of mammoth valves, like whatever, a couple of 100,000 years ago, right? And now there are no more mammoths, right? Like so the take everything that you can, pretty much destroyed a bunch of species that humans kind of relied on. So animists were the survivors that had respect for the environment, that kind of protected this environment, right? But then with the beginning of farming, this was less of a concern. With farming, you weren't destroying the natural environment. You were kind of like planting your own things, and the danger really became the other tribes. So there were so many wars between them that say the religions of Christianity and Islam were about unifying people so that there were fewer wars. But like this has kind of brought the whole world together. So now again we're maybe thinking, whoa, but like maybe we need to protect the natural environment a little bit. And funny enough, I mean, in Europe there is there is this well-protected natural environment, but you also have farmland that is nice and sustainably protected through generations. Like, and why was that? Well, because the aristocrats favorite sport was hunting, and they kept large chunks of natural environment in place, hired rangers to protect that environment, and these were like the nature reserves, right? So in some sense, I think we need to potentially like actively protect the environment, not through ideology, but through this long-lasting ownership. And the other thing is maybe we have to take a look at bringing back some of that respect, both for old species, but also for old ways of life, old ideas, because this ensures the kind of the biodiversity or the meme diversity. Traditions are fundamentally innovations that have survived the test of time.
Yeah, it's one of the things that both from radical east, left, and right that I noticed when I read the manuscripts of survivors of these labor camps in the Soviet Union, or from Nazis. What they said, they always killed the best first. It's like, and the people who spoke up in a way. And one of my goals personally to create this new layer of civilization where the dead still can talk to us is because I believe that diversity of thought is an is a survival mechanism that also allows us to potentially reboot something when our goal when we are out of harmony in regards to how we are living, which is quite funny because the diversity movement, for instance, is it's all the people they think the same things and they don't have, which I find quite interesting in a way. And it reminds me of the book of Frank Herbert. Have you read Herbert with Dune? Yeah. It's and one. I don't want to spoiler the whole series, but at the end, there's this emperor who lives for extends his lives for thousands of years, and the whole galaxy is under one vision, and it's a dystopian nightmare because everything is the same, and it feels to me there's a evolutionary Darwinian downside to not having enough autonomous thinkers and running just one great experiment for humanity. Anyway, I want to shut up because I don't want to forget the last questions. You mentioned that at 15 years old, you went to another country. My question is, what was it like a pinpoint maybe like for you where you navigated into adulthood? Because I feel that where I'm from, leaving the village is an initiation ritual also. So it's like, can you tell us the story of what moving away from your hometown did to you, and particularly what that chapter led you to?
I mean, it was really difficult. You know, I was traveling back home every weekend, and everyone was confused. Like, why is Alex, you know, going home every weekend? Like, you know, doesn't he appreciate this international environment? You know, with all of these kids from all of these countries. And then one of the professors, 10 years
Where
later,
did you go to? From where to where, so people can understand the story?
from Slovenia to Italy.
To Italy. Got it.
But then it's not that far, especially not for me. I didn't even, I mean, I knew it's an international school. I didn't know it's a boarding school. I thought I would be like doing a daily commute. And then I was like, oh, but I should stay there. Oh, what do you mean? Like stay there also over the weekends? Uh, um, so yeah, so there was some, you know, I was a little ignorant. Like my information was not based on like people who knew. My information was based on what I read in the newspaper. The It was very limited. Uh, but like 10 years after I left, right, like one of the professors told me, Alex, only now I understand why you were going home every weekend to check email.
Um,
So like they were really confused. Like they thought, well, you know, Alex is not a good fit. Maybe, you know, we should give his scholarship to someone else because he's going home. You know, he doesn't like this environment, right? And then they were like, oh, but Alex was going online, and um, you know, and now we understand. It's funny, right? Like sometimes when you've got access to something new, when you can like work with certain tools and certain ideas, like people will um, not understand you, will miscomprehend you, and only later in time they kind of realize, like, oh, now I understand what was going on. It was not him; it was me.
when you think of adulthood, what is the moment where you say like Alex transitioned from being a boy to being a man?
I you think I'm an adult yet? It's I might have like a particular version of imposter syndrome. Um, um, I'm just like, you know, I I was gonna like I was making my own money when I was 12, 13. You know, I was developing software. Um, I was like kind of financially um set when I was 12, right? Like I could earn my living when I was 12. I left home when I was 15. When I was 17, I had a job in Silicon Valley, at like one of the core research labs, where uh, you know Stephen Wozniak and Steve Jobs from Apple worked before they started Apple. Um, like people think they're going to be happy if they if they drive a sports car and have a private airplane. Well, when I was 17, I was driving around in a sports car and flying in private airplanes. Like I got this, materialist things out of my system very, very early.
Wow.
Right? Like I knew that people who have all of these things are not necessarily any happier or any better. Which was very liberating. I mean, it was very, very confusing to everyone else, right? Because I just wasn't interested in these things. They were like, Alex, so are you successful? Are you not successful? Like, I don't understand. You seem like you're successful, but you act like you're not successful.
Yes, Sun Tzu said like when your army is when your army is big, you want to appear small, and when your army is small, you want to appear big. Was there a hidden tactic behind this, or did you just feel that or how did you kept your feet on the ground? Because I feel wealth, power, prosperity, also great corruptional agents. How did you stay this down to earth kind of guy, or is this all an act? That's-
I'm really like I'm really not good at acting. I'm pretty straightforward. But like I've always like tried to work on things that I thought were important, right? Like I don't know if I told you that story. Um so after I did that graphic standard, uh like the PNG, right? Like then I was hired into Silicon Valley to make a proposal to JPEG, which became JPEG. Then I was working on a project that was later acquired by NVIDIA. Uh, and then I left because I had an investor that basically funded like a independent technology studio. And then I had a bit of a crisis, right? Like I was doing all of these things, but like, what is reality, right? Like I wanted to kind of go and study and understand. So then I went and just studied, and I was in academia for a decade or so. Um, and out of that decade in academia came a couple of breakthroughs. For example, the technology where computers can come up with new concepts, where computers can come up with new words. And interestingly enough, like I was invited to give a talk in London, and there were like 6 people who came to my talk, and one of them was Geoffrey Hinton, who won the Nobel for physics less than a year ago, right? And his first deep neural network paper was published a few months after he came to my talk using the algorithm that I presented in that talk. But I wasn't interested in like doing that at the time because I was concerned about the problem of information reliability. Like sometimes, we're sure, and sometimes we're not sure, and we try to work around this uncertainty over what is true and what is not true. So I spent another couple of years doing research on this question of probability. And out of that project came a software tool that has been used for at least 2 Nobel Prizes. And then I was like, okay, but like internet is on a really bad track now. This was like 2007. Was like we're kind of going to the financial crisis that was never really properly addressed, and the internet was getting worse, right? And I thought, well, I don't think the world is a peaceful place anymore. So one of the first American presidents, John Adams, he had this quote that I will kind of misrepresent, and it's like, I study strategy and war so that my children can then study mathematics and engineering, so my grandchildren can study art. Right? I realize like we're not in peacetime anymore. I cannot do philosophy and mathematics and so on. I need to go back to the fundamentals, because like things are getting worse, and you cannot optimize for a peaceful world when you're in turmoil. So basically that was my transition into like proper entrepreneurship, right? Like where you get out of the comfortable institutions, give up a steady paycheck and security and all of that, and basically go and live in the woods of whatever money you can earn. But my goal was not to to maximize my income, because like what value is income when you get shot in a dark alley, right? My goal was to maximize the odds of survival of life.
Maximize the survival chance of life.
Yeah.
Now that's a statement to live by, which touches me deeply. When was this awakening happening for you? Because something similar, I think, happened to me a few years ago, where I was never a political person in my whole life. Like, I like to ride my dirt bike. I like to have drink coffee in cool places and interview people in the rice fields and write about that. But some time ago, for me, particularly when it was through the exposure of the story with my father, where I learned what prosecution feels like, and it was like the powerlessness of it, feeling like, oh, people can just seize your bank account, or people, this is how they treat you if you're not protected by laws anymore, for instance. Like, gave me a glimpse of what a post-civilization state of the mind would feel like. And I would not like that for anybody I love. It's like, if there's a certain feeling, I'm a 2 meter tall guy, I'm good at fighting, I would even survive in a Mad Max scenario, but I would not like to wish this upon the more gentle beings of this world, like some of the women I respect, or the elders, or something like this. And it really happened to me when this whole thing for me personally, with Ukraine escalated, where it was like, it was so strange hearing there was like flags everywhere in my country to take an active side with the war and to push for support. And what I see now is like, well, what actually does this support mean? We've given $6 billion to this to arms with a neighbor where there's just a super nuclear superpower. I'm like, this will affect everybody of us. And I remember that every time there was like something like me not having signal on my phone, I was afraid. I was like, it is just a signal, and it kind of like broke the umbrella of this protective society. And then the first time I wondered, is something going to happen? When was this shift for you happening, that you developed this global awareness in regards to there maybe needs to do something for me? And I love that, even like this quote you said with studying war, I've created like a to read list for me with like 1,000 books on my website. And the first category of that initially is all about war. And I wondered, and I was asking recently, Daniel, why do you have this as the first topic? And I realized I never thought about this, but I was like, just felt that this is the most relevant topic I should learn about at this time. How did this come about for you personally?
Ooh. So like Slovenia had a conscript system, and I was conscripted into the military, and I was assigned to infantry, right? Like, infantry are the people that basically dig trenches and guard them, and die there. So But at that time, I was a relatively accomplished computer scientist. So I saw that they're doing like a day of open doors, like a day when you can visit the military headquarters. So I went there, right? And I told them, hey guys, like I've done this in computer science and that in computer science, and I'm gonna be in infantry, kind of standing with a gun in the woods. Like maybe the military can make better use of me. And then they were like scratching their beards and you make a good point, right? So anyway, so then I went into the infantry, learned how to dig trenches, how to place mines, how to remove mines, how to shoot from a rocket launcher and how to throw a grenade. When I was like learning how to throw a grenade, I had this sergeant next to me with a big stick, and I was asking, why do you have this big stick? And he's like, well, this big stick is what I would use to hit your arm if you don't throw the grenade. And then he said, some soldiers just freeze.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I threw the grenade, was a big bang, and he didn't have to use the stick. And then suddenly, just as we're camping in the woods, and when you're camping in the woods, it's basically like one big tent of like 30 snoring men who haven't showered in a week. It's a very memorable experience. And they tell us, hey, do you know how to use a computer? If you do, get on that truck, right? So then we like crawl out of the mud, get on the truck, we're transported to the capital. We're unloaded into a parking lot. We go like clean the mud off the shoes in like a puddle of water that was there. And then we go for the interview, right? Like, and out of like 80 soldiers that came on those trucks, they took 12. And I was like one of those 12. And turns out that the folks I suggested, hey, make better use of me, started a special branch of the military focused on IT. So can you imagine this? Like you're a conscript, like you're a kid, you're told go into the military, but you don't go straight into the military. You first go to the headquarters and tell them of a slightly different vision. And then by the time that you're there, like a new department opens up basically for you and your friends. And we were doing various things. We were doing data analysis on war games. We were doing red teaming in like battle simulations with like professional soldiers. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah, very, very, very cool. And yeah, tell me more. Tell me more. Where did what happens next? How do you transition from throwing a grenade to probably being the IT department of the military?
I mean, you get on the truck, and then you pass the interview.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think the fusion of military and technology is fascinating, because do you believe, for instance, humanity needs war as a
I don't think humanity can
fuel
choose. I don't think humanity can choose. Like war is not something you choose. War is something that comes to you, and then you're either ready or you're not ready. And the way you don't have war is when good people have military skills.
Yeah, it's for people who want to read a little bit up on that. There's a section on my website called Great Books, and there's like 100. I've researched 100 top books that are used for military training. Some of them that are real, like Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Von Clausewitz on war is also a great piece that I've read. I think The Prince also is not the worst piece to read in that context.
Discourses on Livy is the last book by Machiavelli that's actually much more profound than The Prince.
Really, I have to get on that for sure. What is some lesson let's talk about your education a little bit in regards to some of the authors that had an impact on you, like the Machiavelli, for instance. I'm not sure that they didn't, but what is something you learned from him that you feel is relevant for today? Because I've never met somebody who's articulated this so well this sense of like masculine responsibility or general responsibility in regards to educating yourself in these topics that are forbidden in a normal school. Like it's like they are not taught to anymore. We have an entire generation here in Germany who don't know anything about this. It's like, how did you come across this, and what is something you took away from this philosopher?
I mean, to some extent, like the thing that I'm most fond of in Machiavelli is fundamentally him retelling Aristoteles. So it's like these things go way back, and actually that's what's really fascinating. How like long history do these ideas have? I don't know, but like when you spend time with like smart, wise people, right? Like you really get surprised. You know, I was visiting a friend who was the head of a monastery. And you know, I got there, and he had like a book of Tibetan Buddhist exercises, and he's a Catholic monk, even like, you know, head of a monastery, right? So like wise people across different cultures will find many more commonalities than, say, a religious person and a communist, right? Like there is such a disconnect between people who are fundamentally followers of ideas in contemporary society. But like people who pursue this wisdom will often be able to communicate across almost like divergent um, ideas that seem divergent, but they're not divergent per se. They divergent in part because of what's happening in the environment, and because of all these like lords that try to um, build a strong cult at the expense of everyone else.
If you would give somebody advice for like for me, reading is a little bit like inviting somebody into, if the psyche is the house, you're inviting somebody in. How do you stay the lord of the house and avoid being ideologically possessed by that particular spirit? Because for me, an Alexandrian spirit is somebody who has their own ideas and who doesn't follow anybody, but the conscience or whatever is their truth. I feel like whenever somebody identifies them very vividly with an identity of a philosopher, or it's all, they always strike me more as cult members rather than active agents of their own authoring, so to say. How do you read without becoming a mouthpiece of that particular philosopher?
It's a really good question. It's kind of hard to say, but what I would say at the moment, I think, is that um, I think the wise in the current world are insufficiently assertive with respect to the fools that will be raising their mobs. Like there is this repeating wisdom that keeps coming back, which is that you don't debate with fools. You beat them up. It's in the Bible. Like the only time you debate with a fool is to show that he's a fool. It's in the Bible. It's in the book of Proverbs. Like, we're so polite in the society. We're so pacifists that we let like crazies start wars. So I think it's less about who's the follower and who's the leader. Like when you have a wave, which molecule of water is the leader? It's a wave. It doesn't matter. The question is, like, are you on the path of the future, or are you just going to be thrown away by the
Story comes
river of
from
time?
I was when I was a teenager. I had to get ready for. I was a basketball player growing up, and there was especially events like twice a year where we would get ready for the season. And my brother had his scholarships because he was a pro already at that time, and I was emerging as a pro. And we would go to Switzerland to learn how to ride ski and to be in an environment where we would play with the other players. And I was like very not behaving very well. And I remember this, a basketball player is very tall. Like I'm 2 meters tall, but they are like 210. So they're and strong as superhumans. And I remember me being late or something and speaking up, and I had some ideas. The moment I started to speak idea, they all punched me, and it was like a proper beating from like seven people. But it was in a meaningful way, and the climate where there were consequences for insanity, for stupidity, for being the fool. And I feel like something we have a very strange passive climate where like the people who should speak are somewhat silent, and the people who should really shut up like push themselves into into the limelight. Do you have any advice for somebody maybe who should say something but is being silent right now?
I think we need to connect and kind of build communities. Like we cannot just rely on institutions to kind of give us a spot. I think we need to become more entrepreneurial, especially when it comes to institutions.
Yeah, it
Like
reminds me of
we're running on the inertia of the past, and like at some point you have to go and you have to do a rebirth, not not like a revolutionary rebirth, like, oh, we're gonna do everything anew, right? Like, but a kind of careful continuation and evolution of the institutions, of the ideas, of the philosophies, right? Like, I mean, we are fundamentally curators. Like, we're curators of ideas. We share things that we found that are valuable. We try to connect them together. We try to find a partner that would be a good fit to create a family, and then we try to pass the best ideas to the kids and give them the resources. Like, this is a part of life. It's this preservation of this continuity. And sometimes you just we also have a tendency to be lazy. And I think right now we are out of options. Like, we cannot be lazy anymore. Like, we have to come together, we have to organize, not let the extremists organize, but let the middle organize with the respect for all the wisdom of the past, for an integrated wisdom of the past. And because like right now what's happening, all right, so okay, so Trump, right? Like, how did he become the president? Well, so turns out that in 2015, the team around Hillary Clinton were thinking like, all right, like, let's sabotage some of the candidates of the Republicans, where we suppress the folks who are who are likely to win, and we boost the folks who are not likely to win. And Trump was one of the candidates that Democrats boosted because they thought that Trump would be easy to defeat. Or another example, Antifa, the original anti-fascists in Germany. Well, yeah, I mean, they were against fascists, but were also against the Social Democrats, the SDP. Or, for example, in Russia, like the Tsar had a secret police, and the secret police was basically supporting the Leninist against like the moderate left. You know, it's just this repeating pattern, right? Like where one side that's on the losing, that's supposed to basically kind of step away for a while, okay, tries to maintain power by playing dirty tricks. And the dirty tricks is usually like divide and boost. Right. And so, I mean, today I learned that Israel was supporting Hamas, the predecessor group to Hamas, because they would fracture the power of the PLO. And I'm not like defending PLO, like they were responsible for so many acts of terrorism in the 60s. But still.
It's so many follow-up questions. In regards to the silence of people who have something to say, I always, one of my favorite quotes is from Dante Alighieri. It's like he said, like the hottest. It's one line from the Divine Comedy, which I think everybody should read. It's particularly for men who haven't learned what love is. I think it's a good blueprint. It's like there's one line that says like the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who maintain their neutrality in times of moral crisis. And it's really not taking a side, I feel, whether you're on the side of life or not.
Yeah, I you know, there's this idea like, can we just get all the extremists to lose? Well, the problem is, unless you become like a radical centrist, like one of the extremists is going to win. So if you don't like extremism, you have to become a radical centrist. You have to recognize that when there is a war of ideas, you sometimes have to take a stand for wisdom, not for an ideology.
So here's a question that I have for you. Charlie Kirk, an author, just got assassinated. For me, like, my father was also an author in his own way, and I felt very much aligned with what his son was feeling, even though I was blessed enough that my father survived. But I knew like how it destroyed the narrative in which I was living in, and how it affected me. And one of the things that I am afraid of personally as a human being is that one of the strange things about extreme forms of governments is the radical left and the radical right. One of the things I feel in Shaman is that they impose an eatable complex among the citizens, which is like everything is going to be done by the leader or by the party or something. And in Germany, we have right now a system, for instance, where civic duty is not emphasized anymore. The state takes care of the elders and everybody seems to be fine with it, where we just dismiss our mothers and fathers to these elderly homes. We give our children to these public education facilities rather than educating themselves. We give the mentally sick to these institutions, and they're going to there's very not an encouragement on responsibility. And one of the things that I'm afraid of is that we can evolve through killing the artists, the authors, the dissidents, the people who have a problem with bowing down to these insane people, that when they get killed, there's not enough people anymore who make a stance. You as a free thinker yourself, and as an enemy of the extremists, so to say, what was going through your mind when this was happening? You're right now in the States still, right?
I'm currently in Europe.
You're currently, of course, we're in the same time zone, but like as a member of who's lived in United States, what was going through your mind when you saw this happening that felt to like quite a significant a moment in America's history?
It's you know, it's really sad when fundamentally good actors, you know, get taken out. Like I don't agree with everything Kirk is saying. I didn't even know very much of him, right?
Likewise,
But
by the way.
I he was someone who was actually talking to people and trying to build bridges, and who would sometimes even debate people who were very different from him, but in a respectful way. To dismiss someone like Kirk as a fascist, I think this is the real fascism. He was supporting a culture of dialogue, culture of debate. And to dismiss him as a fascist, I think, is a betrayal of humanity. I don't think ignorance is a sufficient excuse. I think it's malice, just plain out malice.
I would love to talk with you about malice also. I feel there's a before I go to that topic, I'm always aware of Franz. What's his name? Franz Ferdinand, the guy who got shot and that triggered the First World War.
Yep, in Sarajevo.
Yeah, what do you feel? Do you think a cataclysmic trigger event happened that will lead to a global exchange of war? Or do you think, how can we recognize that? Because one of the things that for me, it's right now, as a European, as a German, as a Socratic, it's very hard for me to keep track of all the insanity that's happening right now. And I'm like, I'm turning on the news. I'm like, it's very strange for me to predict what's happening next. How does it feel like for you, and what would feel the criteria for this is a real kind of moment? Let's prepare, so to say, if there is actually a preparation for what would happen after such a moment. And it's like to give, for instance, there was this assassination attempt of Trump, and it's like, for me, there was like psychologically very I paid a lot of attention to that, both on the side of what would have happened, like if the assassination attempt would have been successful, and how did this change him. It's like one of the things when I'm here in the city of Berlin, where Hitler preached, for instance, one of the things that changed Hitler a lot was surviving a near-death experience when he was at the front, and his friends were all in his trenches fighting, and he went on a bike and he went away pretty much to deliver a message or some shit, and he came back and all his friends were dead. And I think one of the things that did psychologically to Hitler was this feeling of being ordained or destined to, that he didn't die for a particular purpose, in regards to, okay, it seems that I am it fueled this narrative for him. And I'm wondering if this is the same thing that happened to Trump, and how we can potentially recognize a moment where that's a shifting point for society. Yeah, sorry, this was like the boys question ever, multi-layered on 7 different fronts in a way.
I think it takes two to tango, right? I think that the problems of the US are not attributable just to Trump. I think they're attributable to a dysfunction in collaboration across the political aisle. So, for example, Trump's legitimacy is constantly attacked by the Democrats. And as a result, proper governance around Trump is not possible, right? Because if someone who would be a reasonable person would be shunned by all the Democrats for working with Trump, so then Trump basically hires all these crazies that are willing to take roles in his government, right? And then we have anti-vaxxers and all sorts of insane ideas kind of coming to the fore. But I honestly, I think, Trump's trying to do his best. I don't think is illegitimate. I think it's the Democrats that are basically trying to take this legitimacy away. They're not just taking legitimacy away from Trump, but they're taking legitimacy away from presidency and from the Constitution. So I think it's a highly problematic situation, right? If you have a democracy, right, you have to respect that whoever gets elected president is president. Because if you stop doing that, then you you fracture the country.
It's
Like folks are starting a war, without proper foresight or preparation. And then in the end, everyone suffers, right? Like the policies that Trump is doing with a small group of people, right, like are much worse than the policies that Trump would be doing in an alternative reality where the society actually still work together. Or for example, like Russia, right? Like you've got this like tiny little clique around Putin that are making, awful decisions. I mean, Putin had this idea of like taking down Ukraine in 3 days in a special military operation. Like when his head of FSB told him, like, don't do this, it's a bad idea, Putin basically tore him up in public and went and did that. Where his own people told him, like, don't do it. And now, whenever someone says, like, maybe we shouldn't continue this, war in Ukraine, well, they die. So, at the same time, like, I mean, Ukraine is not like a particularly wealthy country, but I mean, they're doing an incredible job, protecting fundamentally like the values of Europe without proper support. So, I don't know, it's mind-boggling, but like, there is one thing, like, that Putin was working in Germany for many years, and he was kind of, supporting the left-wing terrorists in Germany at the time. So he knows German culture and he knows how to manipulate it. And his innovation has been to basically support both the far left and the far right at the same time, weakening the the adversaries to Russian interests.
It's I'm in Berlin right now, and it's like it's so interesting because Berlin is a culture hotspot for where you can see many ideologies played out, and it's like, how do you defeat a country? Well, if you convince them of the idea that they will never need any defenders, like the very idea of masculinity here is it's like the guys here you meet is like they're busy like taking drugs and partying at the weekend, and it's like some of the very foundational social constructs are here, like family, like having children. Like some of the ideas of like propagating to the generation have been so much under attack that it's been now a conversational point when you go on a date where it's like, do you want to have children? Or like, is do like some of the ideas like, I like to work on entrepreneurial problems. You always have to make a case for yourself first, where you check if the other person is fine with that, or if that person has a negative bias towards people who build things, because like there's like the idea the builders are thieves of tomorrow, so to say. So it's like there's many interesting things. I'm sometimes wondering, I wonder if this is all randomly, or if there's just like some finance movement to corrupt the culture from the up way down, and now you have, how easy would it be to take the city right now that is not aligned and doesn't have a coherent culture anymore? Do you believe that there's some like from a conspiracy theory level, some movements between the countries to make each other weaker on that level?
Oh, it's not a conspiracy theory. There is evidence that this has been going on for quite a while. And I can tell you more off the record, because all of these things are fundamentally kind of suspicions, and the data is somewhat limited, and to some extent like revealing this data is also going to hinder the success of say radical center. The one thing that you mentioned is entrepreneurship, which I think is really interesting. But like, why is it always a company that is a result of this entrepreneurship? It's a family is an act of entrepreneurship, a result of entrepreneurship. A community is a result of entrepreneurship. An institution is a result of entrepreneurship. I think we're seeing entrepreneurship in a way too narrow of a way. And there is so much competition, like who's going to make the next, cool app and so little competition on who's going to make like the best livable community, or like a really solid family, or a new institution, right? Like I think entrepreneurship can be much broader, and when you think of it in a more broad way, you are going to increase the odds of success.
And I wish that people would. I like how you ask questions always, and I feel like I think people should begin more to ask better questions before they build something. And I feel like everybody builds this new app. Most of them are actually not very necessary, or like would contribute something to the community of being more connected, more thriving. Anyway, I'm digesting. When you think of your entrepreneurial journey, what was your proudest moment as an entrepreneur for you? Like the most meaningful one? Because there have been so many highlights and lowlights, and you've been, if I look to your public persona, there's like extraordinary achievements, but I feel there's always something also where it's like,
There were a couple of cool moments, right? Like, and again, like you're gonna notice that I see entrepreneurship in a much broader way. I see entrepreneurship as in like getting things done. You know, one of one of those moments was, I think, around like late 2000s, when Microsoft promised that they're finally going to properly implement the PNG image format in Internet Explorer. They've been like quietly trying to sabotage PNG by implementing it in a bad way, so that people wouldn't be able to rely on that, so that like Microsoft could like propagate their their strategy of like divide et impera. But like when they basically admitted defeat, like, okay, like we're gonna do the standard properly, like we're not gonna intentionally break it. I felt okay. Took 15 years, but like we finally did it.
How many people it's so crazy that you're like almost like a father figure of the internet, where I have the greatest respect for. One of the things I like about the engineers of yesterday, where I was writing many books about therapy and counseling for a while. And a good therapist is almost like Freud, where you would sit behind the client, but the client is not, they don't constantly see the person. I think sometimes I like that about software, that it's soft, and that's like the inventors take a step back and they just make this gift and contribution, and they're not constantly in the limelight. But still you've impacted, well, like the whole planet through this project. What does it feel like, and do you have advice for people who want to make impact on a large scale? Because I also hope that like this library I'm building is gonna have a similar impact like what you did.
I mean, like, okay, when I was 18, I built this image compression technology that then ended up on Mars by the time I was in my early 20s. So we can go beyond the planet.
That's
like
great.
don't like it can be done.
So the question would be pretty much, as for those listening, those Alexandrian entrepreneurs who want to create something good for the world, like what would be a piece of advice in regards to helping at scale? Because it's like whether sending some software to Mars, or like building a foundational piece of the internet that is not still being used by everybody, which is also insane that in this ephemeral world where it seems that everybody is like, everything you built is irrelevant a year later. How do you impact at scale, and what is like a piece of advice you would maybe give to this person, or to like how would you help that next person who is just beginning their journey?
Like, it's so important to kind of do the things that others aren't doing. Okay, like I think in the success rate of entrepreneurs is historically not that high right now. And I think in part it's because everyone's trying to do a small number of things instead of like doing bigger things, where they would be building institutions, where they would be building communities, right? Like every innovation right now has a very hard time getting widespread adoption. Like the early stage resources are scattered, and it's very hard to kind of get to the stage of like scaling up. So so the real opportunity is very much like what I said before. Like, stop thinking of just you as one entrepreneur that's making a product, okay? And and start thinking of you as a part of a community that you're building, as a part of the institutions of the future that you're building. Because that's where the real opportunity is, not just for those who do this, but also for everyone else who is innovating on products that are largely limited by the difficulty of scaling up. So entrepreneurship is a much broader category than just like building a product. Okay, like of course, like it has to work as a product. Even institution has to work as a product. Like if I go and replace my driver's license, I need to get a new driver's license, right? Product thinking is fine, but I think product is something that consumers buy is a very, very narrow set of opportunities for entrepreneurs.
We've spoken about some of the, for me, authors is also an entrepreneurial venture. It's the launch of a book. It's a product in itself also, and somehow they managed to create something that was useful, impacted people at scale, and preserved. Anyway, I think time is also a great filter whether or not something was a good idea. And I love that you said that, like, bad ideas have an idea of killing themselves. I think good and noble ideas have the tendency to live on forever. And one of the things that I would like to ask is, like, do you feel with modern entrepreneurs there's something wrong with the story? Because one of the things that I have a hard time using all these corporate terms, and I just can't shake off the feelings that it's a very shallow way to think about creation itself. And I feel when I'm walking to Berlin, some of these cathedrals took hundreds of years to build, and I just feel that the people who built this, they weren't thinking about, I sell 10% of the equity and you join and you get this and we have an exit in 2 years. I just felt that these guys were driven by something higher and could look longer into the future, and were actively agents of building a piece of a civilization they wouldn't maybe even be a part of anymore. Like, what do you feel is maybe some advice in regards to not just what to build and how to, but also how to treat entrepreneurship as a philosophy that governs us all,
Yeah, I mean, those people were co-creating the city that is allowing you to do your work right now. They're your co-founders. They're your investors.
Yeah.
The question I would ask is, are you building a product or are you building a university of the future? And yes, I mean, the university is a product, but it's much more than just a product.
Never. I had it. I met with a CTO yesterday, and he's just got burned out a little bit from his last startup. And he said, um, he's helping a little bit with some of the tech problems and he said, like, Danny, you're working on this a lot by yourself. And I was so bewildered by this statement because I never felt like this. I felt like, so connecting with these books, I felt always like there's an army of ancestors behind me who kind of like cheering and giving me ideas, and where it's much more on me, like building a subtle part with their help in a way. And I think that this idea of seeing yourself as a successor of the great people of the past is being surrounded by friends, at least me, makes these lonely nights feel as if I would be on holy ground with great company around me. If you could talk to these people, these co-founders that we had of the past, what would you tell them, pretty much? Or be a message you would send back into history? So it could be broadcast to the screens or papyrus or so whatever they use to receive information. If you could send them a message to the founders of the past, what would you send them?
It's a really good question that I haven't really thought that much about. But I think the whole idea of basically polite people acting polite in conditions of war is a very, very serious mistake. Like, if polite, calm, peaceful people stopped being polite, nice, and peaceful to stop extremism, like we wouldn't have the disasters that we have right now. Like Palestinians would not let Hamas expand and build, tunnels under schools and hospitals. Israelis wouldn't tolerate basically trying to fracture, the Palestinian people, but would let them basically govern. The anti-fascists would not fight the center, but would basically fight the fascists. The Democrats in the US would not boost Trump when it seemed like it would help Hillary Clinton. Like there are so many cases, right? When a couple of like active extremists basically drag the whole enterprise into a really bad direction. Like all the Russian spies would have like eliminated Putin instead of like disagreeing with him in public. Right? Like there's so many opportunities for people from basically kind of a place of center and wisdom to do things that in conditions of peace would be violent, but in condition of war are peaceful.
Many authors have your name or a variation of it. I just noticed. It's like one of the people that I really admired that just came to mind was Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who said that one person who can say no can bring down a tyranny, so to say, and he for sure like paid the price for it in regards to like going to the gulag as a consequence of the remarks he made about Stalin. I think it was at that point. If we are moving on to the last part of the interview, because I know you have many important things going on, what were some books that shaped you into who you are? Like some, if you could name 3, for instance, where if we can name them, something where you say like these were part of creating the moral character of Aleks, or like you as a person, which do you feel like had a significant impact on you?
I had a very kind of diffuse reading, and I've read so many things from so many different sources, some of them really quickly. I think a really important concept to understand is the concept of a meme that Richard Dawkins introduced and wrote about. Meme is this idea that spreads, not because it's a good idea, but because it spreads. I think the classic religions have so much wisdom in them, and it's been really fascinating. Like when you expand and you're able to draw inspiration from all of these versions of religion. Like you can compare, and you see basically all these generations of wise people around the world trying to create a better future and communicate in the best possible way. And I think the process of building libraries is more important than individual books, even though there is no library without individual books. But the curation about like who decides what books should be read is a very sensitive one. I return to to a school I used to attend, and I looked at the library, and it has changed so much. It was at the time when I was there, it was curated by people who were looking for wisdom. When I went there last, it was curated by activists who wanted to push their ideas onto others.
On my way to our interview today, I drove by the very place where the Nazis burned the books of some of my favorite authors, like Freud and some of the psychologists. And I wonder if curating a library and putting the books to the place where nobody will find them is almost as bad as burning them altogether. And this is a challenge that I'm having right now, Alex, if I'm being completely honest. Like, my goal is one of the questions that keeps me up at night is, how do I to remove the intermediary from the library that I'm currently building? Like, because it's like many of the spirits that I would like to resurrect on this platform, or people who should use this, are not in conform with what would be, for instance, be allowed by many governments. Like, it would exclude me from entire markets. Like, if I bring in anti-communist literature and bring some of these people alive, I'm not even sure like I can safely travel across China, for instance. Or like, if I'm I don't know, like, and I feel like my time frame is way too short to even judge what a person should read or not. And I just feel that there should be freedom in regards to having history decide like what's a good idea. And or as I love also that you said that memes, that some ideas, that some things just spread for the sake of it. Anyway, have you any advice for me personally as a friend on how to think through this properly? Because it potentially could mean also like loss in revenue, or some of these nutcases taking a closer look at burning down what I'm hoping to build.
So one of the problems managing online communities has been that some people are trolls, like they're going to be annoying and obnoxious and so on. But at the same time, if you turn their accounts off, they will come back under a different account. So one of these like online communities, what they did is they created a separate realm. And if you're a troll, you're transferred to that realm where you can interact with other trolls. But other people don't actually see the trolls. Like, trolls live in the dungeon, right? But they have the company of other trolls. So it's the same with libraries. Like, when someone wants to remove a particular book, it is removed from the dungeon that they live in. And it appears in the anti-dungeon of the forbidden books. So this way you maintain balance in the universe, right? Like, you remove from somewhere, but you add it somewhere else. The other day, I was looking at a particular company, and someone noticed that when this company was asked to remove specific documents, they listed the removed documents in a long list of removed documents.
Yeah.
So this way, they made the censorship transparent.
It's also, I think, a beautiful philosophical question. Like, am I currently in the library or am I in the dungeon, in regards to what part of the debate I am in?
Yeah, but like one more thing just before we continue, like you're saying like, well, I don't really want to be the curator because I don't want the responsibility to be then persecuted for the act of my curation. And I'm like this is the this is impossible. Like, sometimes we have to take a stand.
This is not
But
what I'm afraid of. Well, what I'm afraid of is that the next person will not care. Like I'm afraid for the life. I don't give a shit. Like for me, I don't need much. I can just do push-ups in the prison and eat much. I'm fine there. It's like many like it's a family tradition pretty much to go to these things. But it was for me, it was more like the next person will not care and I turn this into a commercial product and I would just create another problem for humanity rather than a solution.
succession is a very important problem, and has to be approached with a lot of care.
Okay, let's have three more questions. Then I know then you're on a clock. If you could resurrect somebody from like maybe like 1 to 5 people from history as your board of advisors, who would you pick, and what would be the first question you would ask them?
Oh God, I haven't thought of that, but I think it would be I think it would be really cool to have a advisory board of the prophets of the past and see them talking to each other.
It's we have a group chat feature on the platform where I'm sure we can have the council of the Old Testament there. Okay, if you could address like two more questions and we out. If you could address all the world leaders today, like by any chance they all tune in, they'll subscribe and they watch this very segment of the people who are currently in power, what would be something you would direct their way as somebody who has sneezed?
Maximize the odds of survival of life. And the other thing that's really important is like the better that we collaborate, like we cannot become just one uniformity, right? Like I think there is a distinct need for evolution, and in the process of evolution, you need to have a couple of different experiments running at the same time. But the ability to come together and create something bigger is something that I think is the frontier of this planet.
A grave could house an avatar of yourself. What would be the final message be that would appear if somebody visits your grave, so to say? And that's get like stored like an Elder Sea Scroll, like a time capsule almost in a way where I don't know, maybe my son would stumble in the future towards this place on a pilgrimage. What would be a message that would be played there?
I will come back.
Pouring out. I love it. Okay. Question I should have asked you, Alex, during this podcast. I feel like you've been doing so many interviews. I feel it's an impossible job for me to pick up I'm not a journalist or anything. Any question you as an advice where if you couldn't start back at the interview said, Daniel, this is a question that would have opened up a lot of things that I failed to answer, so to say.
I've tremendously enjoyed this conversation. I cannot possibly imagine how you could do this any better. So
I feel I set you up for a compliment myself. I promise this was not the intention of it, but I'll take it. Many people listen to this conversation who are also have an Alexandrian spirit. How can we support you on your current quest, and where can we find you?
I think the best support is going to be the creation of a community of wisdom. Like I would love this vision to grow and evolve. We are at a time when the institutions have been hijacked by activists, and I think it's really important to kind of bring back the communities of the wise and the learned, in whatever way we can see, in whatever way we can accomplish. So I think just creating this and kind of fighting for the future is really important.
Where can we find you?
Do I want to be found? Online.
Could you name your, at least a LinkedIn profile or something where people who want to learn more about your work can go to?
It's just my last name with a dot before the IN.
Aleks Jakulin. Okay. I would like to express my gratitude for you making so much time for this podcast. It's been a great privilege and honor. You have been an inspiration to me ever since we met, and I'm looking forward to great things together in the future. I also would like to thank everybody who listened to this interview. And Aleks at the end said something that meant a lot to me that I didn't know at the beginning, which is that there is a community of learners and those who want life to extend that awaits for you at the end of your studies, so to say. So if it feels a little bit lonely in the beginning, have trust that friends will emerge at the right time if you pick the correct course. Thank you, Aleks, for showing up. Let's do this again in the future.
It was a true pleasure. Take care.